We're going to take a look at all the abilities and skills for the Sorceress class in Diablo 4. This is the beta right now, so we're going to take a look at this. If you don't know about Sorcerer ones, we're going to look at them right now. So the basic skills are up at the top, obviously. And there's Arc Lash, Firebolt, Frostbolt, and Spark. Now, all these are ranged except for Arc Lash, which is basically a melee attack, which of course then makes it like the strongest. It's extremely strong as far as DPS, at the cost of you can't attack from a range. But let's take a look at Firebolt instead. So Firebolt is like this, like a little missile that you shoot. And then let's take a look at Frostbolt. It's going to be similar, but just move slower. And then we have Spark, which looks like this. Pretty much, they're all pretty much the same exact thing. So it's basically which elemental range damage do you want to do, and then do you want to do a melee basic attack. And at the end of the video, I'll just mouse over every single one of these so you can pause on whichever one. Or I'm going to do it real fast right there. You can pause on whichever one you want if you want to look at any of those. And we'll go over them. Maybe we'll go over them in a sec. But let's go to all the actual abilities. So we got Incinerate, which is kind of a fun ability. So Incinerate is this, and it drains your mana slowly. And you hold it, and you can just do this. At least at low levels, it's pretty weak. I'm not a big fan of that one. Fireball, pretty straightforward. Shoots a fireball that then explodes when it hits something. And just does a giant amount of damage, but really not that crazy of damage. But does damage when it explodes. Then we have Frozen Orb, which kind of just cuts right through people and then explodes at a set distance, or explodes if it hits a wall. The main reason you would do this is to chill a bunch of enemies, and with some of these perks, have other things you can do with it. Then we have Ice Shards. Ice Shards is actually not bad. Its single target DPS is actually pretty good. If you want to convert mana into single target damage. And then we have Chain Lightning, which obviously chains to different enemies, which I can't really show you very well. And also can chain back to yourself, which is not good. So you gotta be careful of that. And then we have Charge Bolts, which are like this. Just erratically go on the ground and damage enemies that they pass through. Then we have down here, they're kind of defensive abilities. We got Flame Shield, which is actually really OP. So this one only lasts for like 2-3 seconds. Makes you invulnerable for 2-3 seconds, but does damage to anyone that you're standing next to. And on top of that, with modifiers, you can get to where it gives you movement speed and heals you for half of your missing life. So it's actually a really nice ability. I'm actually a big fan of this one. This one's super good. We got Teleport, which in my opinion, literally everybody should get. This thing's actually insane. So Teleport lets you do this, which just for traveling the map and going through different dungeons, it's extremely strong. And it does do damage for any enemies that you pass through. And it's on a short cooldown. Then we have Ice Armor. Pretty straightforward thing. You just use it, and now you have armor that absorbs damage for 6 seconds, and you gain more when you take damage or use spells, do damage, whatever. And then we have Frost Nova, so unleashes a Frost Nova all around you. So Frost Nova is like that. Pretty straightforward ability, does damage around you. Then we have like the Conjuration ones. This one is Hydra. Summons these 3 heads that shoot fireballs at nearby enemies. Then we have the Ice Blades, which are these little swords that go around and just smack at people. And then there's the Lightning Spear, which is going to be like that. And it just goes around, it seeks out enemies, and does damage every time it hits them. I personally like Ice Blades. There's a reason for that. Maybe I'll explain it near the end of this. I just want to go through all the abilities with you. All right, so then we have these ones. There's Blizzard, which is, out of these 4, my favorite one. So Blizzard is going to be like this, and you can just place it down, and it does AoE. Ton of damage AoE over time. Then you have another option, which is Meteor, which is like this, and Meteor falls. And you get perks, so second Meteor can fall, 30% chance, whatever, something like that. But Meteor is not that great because it just takes so long for it to come down, and it's very small compared to Blizzard, in my opinion. Niche scenario, maybe better for bosses, though. Then we got Firewall, which is really hard to use effectively on normal enemies, but bosses, you might have better luck just because they need to stand in it to take damage. To get out of it, they don't take damage, although there's a perk that can change that. Mage's Firewall. Then we have Ball Lightning, which is okay. It just doesn't... Its damage always just seems extremely underwhelming, though, but it just does that, and it arcs to everybody that it passes by. Just continually is doing damage to them, basically. And then after that, we have the ultimate abilities. So we have Unstable Currents. Lightning surges within you 10 seconds. And whenever you cast a shock skill, a random core Conjuration or Mastery shock skill is also cast. So I can put that on, and it looks like this. It has a huge cooldown, 65 seconds. Then we have Inferno, which summons a fiery serpent, continually constricts the target area, burning enemies for 906 damage over 8 seconds. So in a way, it's similar to Blizzard. So just everything in this area is just taking that damage over time. Pretty straightforward. And then we have Deep Freeze, which is actually really good if you combo it with certain other abilities. It's basically, I think, of Mei from Overwatch. So you'll use it, you encase yourself in ice, and it does damage nearby, chills enemies nearby. And when it's done, it does a giant burst of damage. Super good if you combo it with certain other skills. Like you do a bunch of stuff, put a bunch of blizzards on your feet, and then just encase yourself in ice so they all beat on it and just take damage over time. And then at the bottom, you have all these ones, like these super perks, whatever key passives. There's Avalanche, Shatter, Overflowing Energy, Veer's Mastery, Isu's Ferocity, and Combustion. If you can pause on those anytime you want. Look at all of them. We'll go over them again in a second, though. Really quick, let me talk about the ones, at least in the beta, at low level that are fun to use. I think at low level, when things aren't dangerous, Arc Lash is totally insane because you can just walk and do things. And then another good one to combo that with is going to be Flame Shield, which then you can just walk up and use Flame Shield and just do crazy DPS. Teleport's also good just for getting around and being mobile. And then there was Ice Blades, and the reason Ice Blades is super nice is because you can get this where its cooldown's reduced by 1 second each time it's a vulnerable enemy, but every time it hits an enemy, it has a 30% chance to make them vulnerable. And then on top of that, you can get this one where 50% of that cooldown reduction is also applied to your other skills. So basically what you do is you just summon these on any enemy that has enough health to get hit a bunch, and then that will make so all your cooldowns of all your skills are much lower, which lets you do more DPS. And then other than that, Blizzard also is really nice to just throw down while you're running around fighting people. Not that, I swapped it out. But yeah, so Blizzard's a really nice one to throw down while you're running around and fighting people. And yeah, so then there's that one. And then all these other ones I'm not a huge fan of. And then for the actual ultimate ability, Unstable Currents is what I've been using, although I'm not entirely sure just yet because it's day 1 of beta. We're going to look at level 25. All right, so let's go through every single one of these perks. We'll go from top to bottom. So we got the basic skills. There's for Arc Lash, you can get this one. So it's initial swipe, critically strikes. If it's critically strikes, it swipes an additional time, which makes you do more DPS. Then I like this one where you get movement speed when you lash enemies with it. And this one instead, you can only get one or the other for these things. If you hit an enemy, a stunned enemy with it, it reduces your cooldowns by 0.25, which can be really nice because it can stun enemies. Every 10 times, it stuns all the enemies. So if you're paying attention to that, it's just you know, more DPS with your other skills. Firebolt has one, so it pierces through burning enemies. Generates 2 mana when hitting a burning enemy, and critical strikes with it increase the burning damage you deal to the enemy by 20% for 4 seconds. Frostbolt has 50% chance to explode on shield enemies, hitting surrounding enemies, chance increased to 100% against frozen. And then you can get this or the other, which is generates 4 mana when hitting shield or frozen enemies, or makes frozen enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. And then we have Spark, which then lets you get its primary target has a 20% chance to hit up to 3 additional enemies, dealing 16 damage. If they're another enemy, Spark instead deals 20% increased damage to its primary target. Each time this one, then you can get each time it hits an enemy has a 3% chance to form a crackling energy, or you can get 2% increased critical strike chance per cast for 3 seconds up to 10%. Then we get down to here to Incinerate. When channeling Incinerate, you burn enemies around you for 15% of the damage per second. And then after that, you get enemies deal 20% less damage while burning from Incinerate. Or you can get every 4 seconds an enemy has been hit by Incinerate. They are immobilized for 1 second. Then Fireball, radius increased based on distance traveled up to 50% larger explosion. Fireball's explosion critical strike damage is increased by 10%. Each enemy it hits increases bonus by 5% up to a total of 25%. And then the other option instead of that one is Fireball deals 10% of the burning damage you've applied to enemies as additional direct damage. Then we have Frozen Orb. So Enhanced Frozen Orb, when cast above 50 mana, Frozen Orb's explosion damage is increased by 30%. And then the other options after that, Frozen Orb's explosion has a 25% chance to make all enemies hit vulnerable for 2 seconds. And Frozen Orb always makes frozen enemies vulnerable. Frozen Orb's explosion restores 5 mana when hitting a frozen enemy. That would be the 2 different options for that one. Then we have Ice Shards, and Ice Shards have a 50% chance to ricochet to another enemy, and Ice Shards always ricochet off frozen enemies. And then your 2 choices are, while you have a barrier active, casts of Ice Shard treat enemies as if they were frozen. And then the other one would be hitting an enemy with 5 Ice Shards in a single cast makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds, which is really good for DPS against bosses if you combine that with like Arc Slash or whatever. Then we have this one, which is not even an ability. They have your max mana is increased by 3, and you can put, I guess, 3 into this, so you can get up to 6 or 9 mana. And then you can put 3 into this one, so your core skills deal 4, 8, and then 12% increased damage when cast above 50 mana. Then we have Potent Warding. After casting a non-basic skill, you gain 2% resistance to all elements and 1% additional resistance to that skill's element for 3 seconds. It can stack 3 times. You get 3 of these. Then we have Chain Lightning and Charge Pulse of Chain Lightning. Gain 3% increased critical strike chance per bounce. And then you can get, if it bounces off you, its next hit deals 25% increased damage. Or when it critically strikes, it has 25% chance to form a crackling energy. So as for charge bolts, hitting an enemy at least 3 times with the same cast of charge bolts releases a lightning over, dealing 44 damage to enemies around them, where that damage is based on your level and all that. And then the option for this one, charge bolts, deals 25% increased damage to stunned enemies, or hitting an enemy with charge bolts reduces their damage dealt by 20% for 3 seconds. And over here, the non-ability ones are Elemental Attunement, Lucky Hit, Critical Strikes have a 5% chance to reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills, can only happen once every 10 seconds. And then this other one, you can get 3 of either one of these, so it's only a 15% chance. But then we have Glass Cannon, which at maximum will make you do 18% increased damage, but take 9% more damage. Then we have Flame Shield. Its 2 options are 25% movement speed when active, and the 2 options it has are heals you for 50% of your missing life, or you gain 25% mana cost reduction while Flame Shield is active. Then we have Teleport, which you can do, so Teleport's cooldown is decreased by 0.5 seconds per enemy hit up to 3 seconds, which is really nice. You can get that cooldown real low. And then you can get Mystical Teleport for 4 seconds after teleporting. Crackling energy hits 2 additional enemies. And then your other option for that is Shimmering Teleport. After teleporting, you gain 30% damage reduction for 5 seconds. Then we have Ice Armor. Your options are, while Ice Armor is active, your mana regeneration is increased by 25%. The 2 options are damage against vulnerable enemies contributes 100% more to Ice Armor's barrier, or enemies that hit you while Ice Armor is active have a 50% chance to become frozen for 3 seconds. Then your options for Frost Nova are killing enemies frozen by Frost Nova reduces its cooldown by 2 seconds up to 6 seconds per cast, when it only has 14-second base cast. That's pretty good. The other 2 options are Frost Nova makes enemies vulnerable 4 seconds, increased to 8 seconds against bosses, and then Frost Nova generates 4 mana per enemy hit. Then down here, the non-skill based ones, we have Align the Elements. You gain 5% damage reduction against elites for each second you haven't taken damage from 1 up to 50%. You can get 3 of that, so 15% damage reduction against them. And then these ones also have 3 of each. So every time you spend 100 mana, you gain 5% damage reduction for 5 seconds. You can get 3 of these. And using a cooldown grants 10% of your maximum life as a barrier for 5 seconds. And then we have this one, you deal bonus up to 3 if you get 3 of them. 3% increased damage for each active conjuration. And then we have Precision Magic. Your lucky hit chances increased by 5%. Then we have Hydra, and that one's our Enhanced Hydra, which is while healthy, which means you have more than 80% of your life. Your cast of Hydra gain 1 additional head. Your 2 options are after you critically strike, your Hydras gain 30% critical strike chance for 3 seconds, or Hydra also burns enemies for an additional 12% of its base damage dealt over 6 seconds. Then we have Ice Blades, where there's Enhanced Ice Blades. Ice Blades cooldown is reduced by 1 second each time it hits a vulnerable enemy. And then there's your Ice Blades, gain 10% increased attack speed per active Ice Blades, or 50% Enhanced Ice Blades cooldown reduction is applied to your other skills. Then there's Lightning Spear. You can, after critically striking, Lightning Spear gains a 5% increased stacking critical strike chance for its duration. And then your 2 options are Collecting Crackling Energy increases the damage your next Lightning Spear cast by 20% up to 100%. Or you can get Lightning Spear stuns enemies for 2 seconds when critically striking. Then we get down to these AoE ones, and the non-skill ones are Icy Veil. Your barriers have a 5% chance, or 5% increased duration. Again, these all go 3 times. Cold Front, while you have a barrier active, you apply 8% more chill, stacks up to 3 times. Lucky Hit, Frost skills have a 3% chance to instantly freeze. Then we have Fire ones. Your Pyromancy skills deal 3% increased damage while you are healthy. Devouring Blaze, you deal 10% increased critical strike damage against burning enemies if they are also immobilized. If they're immobilized, the bonus increases to 25%. And then we have Crippling Flame. Your Pyromancy skills have a 5% chance to immobilize enemies for 2 seconds. And this chance is doubled when you are healthy. So if you get all that, it would be 30 while you're healthy if you have all 3 of them. Static Discharge. Critical strikes with shock skills have up to a 5% chance to form crackling energy. And then Shocking Impact. Every time you stun an enemy, you deal 44 lightning damage to them. And then there's Invigorating Conduit. Upon absorbing crackling energy, you gain 4 mana. Now for the skills, there's Blizzard. Blizzard is Enhanced Blizzard. It deals 25% increased damage to frozen enemies. And then the 2 options are, while you have an active Blizzard, your core skills cost 10% less mana. The other one is, when cast above 50 mana, Blizzard's duration is increased by 4 seconds. Then there's Meteor, and the first one's Enhanced Meteor. If a cast of Meteor hits 3 or more enemies, there's a 30% chance an additional meteor falls on the same location. Then there's Mage's Meteor. Meteors fall 30% faster, which makes the skill a little more effective. And the Wizard's Meteor is the other option, which it makes so the impact immobilizes enemies for 2 seconds. Then we have Firewall. The option for this one, enemies take 25% increased burning damage from you while standing in Firewall. And then Mage's Firewall. Enemies continue burning for 3 seconds after leaving the Firewall. And the other option is Wizard's Firewall. You gain 5% increased mana regeneration per active Firewall, up to 25%. Then we have, for Ball Lightning, there's Ball Lightning's damage rate is increased by 200% of your attack speed bonus. And the two options are after hitting close enemies 50 times with ball lightning, your next cast of it stuns enemies hit for 1 second. And the other option is if an enemy is hit at least 4 times by a cast of ball lightning, a crackling energy is formed. It can only happen once per cast. Now we get down to the ultimates. Now the non-ultimate ones, there is, all these do go 3 times if you want to put the points in. We have Permafrost. Frost skills deal 5% increased damage to elites. Frost, you deal 3% increased damage to chilled enemies and 6% increased damage to frozen enemies. And then Icy Touch, you deal 4% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. And then Frigid Breeze, lucky hits. Cold damage against vulnerable enemies has a 20% chance to generate 5 mana. Then we have over here Fiery Surge. Killing a burning enemy increases your mana regeneration by 10% for 3 seconds. And then we have Soulfire. After standing still for 1.5 seconds, your Pyromancy skills cost 5% less mana. And then Endless Pyre, you deal increased burning damage to enemies. For each second, they remain burning up to 5% after 5 seconds. And then we have Warmth. Every 1 second, you heal for 0.3% of your maximum life for each nearby burning enemy. Healing increased to 0.6 from bosses. Then for the lightning ones, there's hitting enemies with shock skills increases your critical strike chance by 1%. Resets upon getting a critical strike. And then we have this one, critical strikes with shock skills increases your movement speed by 3% for 3 seconds. And then we have Electrocution. Enemies deal 5% less damage for 5 seconds after being critically struck by your shock skills. And then Convulsions. Lucky hits, shock skills with a 3% chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds. And then for the actual ones, we got Deep Freeze. The 2 things you can get for that. When Deep Freeze ends, gain 10% of your base life as a barrier for 6 seconds for each enemy you froze while it was active. And then we have Supreme Deep Freeze. So when Deep Freeze ends, your non-ultimate cooldowns are reduced by 50%, which is pretty nice. For Inferno, we have Prime Inferno. Inferno repeatedly pulls enemies to its center. And then Supreme Inferno. While Inferno is active, your Pyromancy skills cost no mana. So that Prime Inferno could stack really well with Meteor, by the way. That'd be a good combo. Then we have for the Unstable Currents, increases your attack speed by 25% when active. And then the other one is while Unstable Currents is active, Crackling Energy continually pulses and consumes no charges. Then we get down here to the last things, the key passive. So Avalanche, on lucky hits, your Frost skills have an up to 10% chance to make your next cast of Ice Shards, Frozen Orb, or Blizzard consume no mana and deal 40% increased damage. Chance is doubled against vulnerable enemies. And then this one, after freeze expires, enemies explode for 25% of the damage you dealt to them while frozen. And then for the shock ones, we have Crackling Energy hits 1 additional enemy, and each time Crackling Energy hits an enemy, your shock skill cooldowns are reduced by 0.1 seconds, increasing to 0.25 seconds against elites. The other ones, close enemies take 10% increased damage from your shock skills and deal 20% less damage to you. Critical strikes increase these bonuses by 25% for 3 seconds. For the fire ones, we have your burning effects deal 2% increased damage per unique source of burning you applied to the enemy. If the enemy is burning from 3 or more sources, this bonus is doubled. And then finally, this one, your fire critical strike damage is increased by 25% against enemies above 50% life, and your fire critical strike chance is increased by 5% against enemies below 50% life. Killing an enemy with a critical strike grants both bonuses against all enemies for 3 seconds, which honestly sounds insanely strong if you're going to go with fire. So that is all the abilities. I know it's a long one going through all that, but there you go. You can stop on any of that if you want to and pause on any part of that video if you want to. So those are all the sources abilities that they have, at least in the beta right now. There's Paragon, but we can't go to that yet. So hopefully that helps you out at all. Now you know what is in the skill tree for the sorceress in the Diablo 4 beta.